I grew up in a town with a prison. MCI Concord. Massachusetts Correctional Institute Concord, to be precise. And what's funny is when I tell people I grew up in Concord, usually they say, "Oh, that's a beautiful town." And truly, it is beautiful. We have a sweet little town center full of independent shops where you can buy pillows embroidered with the Old North Bridge. You can order a lime Ricky and fries. There's Walden Pond and a long river and lilac trees and hills for sledding. But most people, they never mention the prison that sits right at the center of things, right where the train crosses into West Concord, the other side of the tracks, so to speak. My aunt and uncle, they rented an apartment one year in Concord. They were saving up to buy a house, so they rented the cheapest apartment they could find in town. It was next to the prison. They had a little deck where you could sit outside, enjoy your coffee, barbed wire just over your shoulder. My Uncle Jerry said one day, he said with a smile, "You can hear the men playing basketball sometimes, shouting from over the wall." We all laughed. Whoa, you could hear them playing basketball. A lot of work goes into ignoring that prison. A lot of work goes into propping up the idea that Concord is a quaint and beautiful town where things like Patriots' Day parades and battle reenactments happen, where Thoreau and Emerson and Louisa May Alcott write reflections, and not where people are imprisoned, serving out long sentences behind bars for minor infractions. In 1963, James Baldwin wrote The Fire Next Time, in which he implores America to grapple with the broken morality of racism before it is too late. The title recalls a slave song drawn from the story of Noah. God gave Noah the rainbow sign, no more water, the fire next time. The work, perhaps Baldwin's most famous, is a warning. It is a demand. Love takes off the masks that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. We are at a crossroads, he says. We must confront what is at stake. The masks we wear are what prevent us from seeing clearly the reality of our world. And the masks must be removed, but so much pressure weighs down upon us to keep them on, to maintain polite society, to uphold the way things are so that we can enjoy that cup of coffee right next to a concrete wall and concertina wire that separates us from one another. Because if we truly knew and faced what happened there, we wouldn't be willing to live with those truths. We wouldn't be able to enjoy the cup of coffee. When people say, "Oh, you grew up in Concord, what a beautiful town," I don't say, "Yeah, and there's a site where 600 men await prison sentences. There's a site where untold and unspeakable violence happens, where people are separated from their families and abused by guards, where they're denied nutritious food and adequate time in the sun." I don't say that. I never have. I say, I know, I was so lucky to grow up in a place so beautiful. We're all guilty of playing along, wearing the mask. And the masks we wear, they taint the world. They undercut our experience. They cheapen our ability to know true joy. The suffering we ignore all around us, we suffer for it too. What Unitarian Universalism has brought to my life is an awareness that we cannot live in a world that does not face these truths. that does not face the ways we each contribute to the silencing of violence, to the way each of us swallows oppressions and wears a mask. Unitarian Universalism tells me that it is interdependence, which forces me to see the other truth that Baldwin writes about. He who debases others debases himself. To ignore the violence done unto others at that prison is to do violence unto myself. I am also violated by their violation. My soul is also hurt. And it is not whole, though it longs to be. It is not whole while there continues to be famine and homelessness, while there continues to be unchecked white supremacy and transphobia, while there continues to be silence and shame about rape. I am debased. I am hurting. And my soul is not whole while these things continue to exist. We have to take off the mask and talk about it. We have to confront reality. This is what Baldwin and Unitarian Universalism demand. It's telling to me that it was a black gay man who was able to see so clearly the twisted logic we all employ to go about our days. It is so often those at the very margins whose existence is often subject to cruelty and debasement who can see things most clearly. Unitarian Universalism with love at its center. Love, which Baldwin says is not that infantile American kind of love that's about happiness. No. A love which is about growth, about transformation, about doing the hard thing to make it right. Love which is about wanting for others what it is that you want for yourself, fighting for others to have what it is that you have. And for me, as a white woman with all kinds of advantages, this is how we work to remove the mask, to take up the charge from Baldwin. Confront the reality that we are not whole, cannot be whole, while we live within the mask. We are encouraged each and every day to keep it on, to say, I grew up in a beautiful town, to laugh at that closeness of the violence, the sounds of jailed men playing basketball. We've learned to live with the weight of the mask and ignore the person on the corner asking for $5, to ignore the tax dollars spent to bomb children into oblivion, to blithely go about our days while people turn on their ovens and open the door to sleep with enough warmth. But we cannot live within it. We must take it off. Unitarian Universalism demands it with love at its center. Love which demands confrontation. Love which calls us to account for the privileges we have been given. Love which tells us that we are powerful to enact change. Love which allows us to live with integrity. So what is the mask you wear? What is the lie you uphold? What is the truth you must face, and how will you set it down? How will you work for liberation? How will you be transformed by love? Let us remember this place and this faith, which draws us nearer to the possibility of taking off the mask, which encourages us to spiritual growth and demands a confrontation with the truth, which tells us love will guide us to a future in which our souls are whole. May it be so, and amen. So we're doing something a little bit different than what we normally do today, and we want to invite you all into an activity for a couple of minutes before we continue on with our service. And we're going to do it in two parts. So those of you who are here with us in person have your pink announcement sheet, and on the back is an image of a mask. You all have that? And it looks like you all can see it online as well. You mind zooming in a little bit on the mask, Jeff, if you get a chance? Thanks, Jeff. There's an image also in the chat for those of you who are with us virtually. It's nothing special. It's just an outline of a mask. Most of you, I hope, received a writing implement on the way in or have one with you. And if you don't have one, maybe raise your hand and we'll see if we can try to disperse them amongst us. We're going to take just a couple of minutes to write a word or several words on the mask itself that describes a mask that you wear, a virtual mask, a metaphorical mask that you wear, that keeps you from living your full and authentic self. A mask that you fear you cannot live without and know you cannot live within. This could be an oppression that hinders your life, as James Baldwin was speaking about. It could be a story or a trauma that has kept you from being able to be fully present. It could be a way that you feel pressured to hold your full self back from the world. Love takes off the mask that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. And these masks are deeply harmful to our lives. So if your mask is feeling overwhelming to you, particularly those of you who might be thinking about traumas, I invite you to be gentle with yourself as you write those words. If it feels too painful, just doodle on your mask or turn your imagination to something beautiful. Baldwin said, to accept one's past, one's history, is not the same thing as drowning in it. It is learning how to use it. So don't drown in your own masks. Let's take just a couple of minutes to write one or more, some of those masks that inhibit us from living our full, authentic selves. Keep your writing implement in your mask handy. We'll do the second activity in a few minutes. But first, this story. In the fall of 1977,
Audre Lorde, who is a self-described Black, lesbian, mother, warrior, poet, was told by 2 doctors that she would need to have breast surgery. The likelihood of malignancy in the growth that they had discovered was between 60 and 80%, they said, and the surgery was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Between the telling and the actual surgery, there was a 3-week period of the agony of an involuntary reorganization of my entire life, writes Lorde. Within those 3 weeks, I was forced to look upon myself and my living with a harsh and urgent clarity that has left me still shaken, but much stronger. During the period of her recovery from that surgery, she reflected deeply on what those 3 weeks of involuntary reorganization of her life meant. Audre Lorde has, of course, not been the only person stopped in her tracks by a brush with mortality. How many of us here have been through a health scare or a legitimate health crisis, either ours or someone we loved, which forces us to examine our priorities or scrutinize the essentials of our living? I know that I have. She writes, "In becoming forcibly and essentially aware of my own mortality, and of what I wished and wanted for my life, however short it might be, priorities and omissions became strongly etched in a merciless light, and what I most regretted were my silences. What I most regretted were my silences," she writes. "Death is the final silence," she said, "and that might be coming quickly now, without regard for whether I had ever spoken what needed to be said, or I had only betrayed myself into small silences while I planned to someday speak, or while I waited for someone else's words." She writes, "I was going to die, if not sooner than later, whether or not I had ever spoken myself. My silences had not protected me," she wrote. "Your silence will not protect you," she wrote. She said these words to the Lesbian and Literature panel of the Modern Language Association's December 28, 1977 meeting. And it cannot be ignored that the words of Audre Lorde and also the words of James Baldwin that we are using today, even the words of Tracy Chapman, whose song we are going to hear shortly, arise from a particular place, from a Black and gay or lesbian or queer place, all 3 of them. They were speaking of being silenced by racism and homophobia and poverty. They were speaking of the masks imposed upon them with a legitimate threat to their lives, that they could not be safe without wearing those masks, without hiding part of who they were. But it's also true that all of them, James Baldwin and Audre Lorde and Tracy Chapman, were also speaking to those whose experiences were different. In calling for those at the Modern Language Association to break silences, this panel of educators, Audre Lorde called for white educators to teach Black authors and for straight educators to teach LGBTQ authors, for male educators to teach female authors, because crossing differences and breaking barriers allows love to flow across difference as oppressions come tumbling down. "Your silences will not protect you," she said. "Our silences do not protect us from the pain we fear will come our way if we are brave enough to speak our truth. Pain comes our way regardless," Lorde writes. "We all hurt in so many different ways all the time, and pain will either change or it will end. But meanwhile, the silences that we adopt to try to protect ourselves from being hurt by others end up hurting us in a different way. When we withhold our truths that need to be spoken, or maybe worse, when we try to convince ourselves that lies are the truth, something begins to corrode within us, right? Our deep knowledge of what is right clashes with whatever we have tried to push down into ourselves, and it makes us ill. in mind or in soul, sometimes even in body. As she spoke to this gathering at the Modern Language Association, scars from her breast surgery still tender, not yet knowing that the next 15 years of her life would be a dance with cancer, this cancer that would ultimately kill her. On the third day of Kwanzaa, 2 days before the turning of the year, Audre Lorde said, "What are the words you do not have yet? What do you need to say? What are the tyrannies that you swallow day by day and attempt to make your own until you will sicken and die of them, still in silence? What are the words you do not have yet? What do you need to say? What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day and attempt to make your own until you will sicken and die of them, still in silence?" My friends, we, the alive ones, the breathing ones, are only given one day. We are only given this day. Though we may hope for, plan for a joyful and loving life for decades to come, I certainly pray for that for each one of us. None of us has any guarantees. Audre Lorde's brush with her own mortality, which became then a deepening relationship with her mortality as she faced into this cancer, made it clear that she needed to live a life released from those silences that she regretted so much, the silences that she knew would not protect her. She became more courageous in speaking her truths, no matter how difficult or frightening they may be, and in doing so, she discovered something miraculous. For every real word spoken, she writes, she found and made connections with other women and other people across lines of gender. Together, she says, they bridged differences. They found concern and caring in their shared attempt to break silences. And as Audre Lorde journeyed on, she wrote that she found the strength that she needed to continue to bring voice to her truth in these very connections. The power to be able to live authentically came through the work of living authentically and finding that it connected her with other people. Breaking silence is frightening. Breaking silence removes a barrier that might help to protect us from pain. It is true. But though we may lose some protection, in its place we gain connection. New relationships. We gain new love that feeds our courage to live out loud and to break free from the tyrannies that we have swallowed all our lives. Love takes off the masks that we fear we cannot live without, and know we cannot live within, wrote James Baldwin. Our silences will not protect us from pain, but breaking silences open will fortify us with the power and the strength of miraculous love. Amen. Blessed be.
So for the second part of this exercise, we're going to ask you to think about names to add to your mask. Names of those who have helped you to speak your truth, those who have encouraged you to take off the masks, to break your silences, loved ones or mentors or family members or writers or justice leaders. You could also write the names of those that you want to live for, those who you want to dedicate your truth to. Children, loved ones, those going through what you have gone through, who you don't want to feel so alone. And now, I want you to write your own name on your mask. Because you are the one helping yourself to do this today. And you are the one you are living for. Love is why we do this. Love is how we do this. And love is what comes from us doing this. Bring your mask with you today.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abbey Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abbey just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.